Welcome to the channel. Tonight, we journey to London in November 1935, where the glittering chandeliers of Claridge's hotel illuminate a dinner unlike any other. Among the crystal glasses and whispered toasts, a distinguished financier hosts what he calls his farewell supper. But when the evening ends, he is found dead at the head of the table, his final toast cut short forever. Stay with me until the very end, for this mystery unravels not just a single murder, but a tangle of family secrets buried for 7 long years. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoy these stories and the work that goes into bringing them to life, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can also join our membership for ad-free listening and exclusive mysteries available only to our most devoted sleuths. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from tonight? I always love reading your messages and seeing how far our circle of mystery lovers has grown. Now pour yourself a hot cup of coffee, settle into your favorite chair, and let's begin. The Last Supper at Claridge's, Chapter 1. An invitation most curious. The November fog lay thick upon London that evening, curling around lampposts and creeping through the narrow streets like a living thing. I had just settled into my favorite armchair at the club, prepared for a quiet night of brandy and the Evening Standard, when a telegram was placed in my hand. The message, short but unmistakably urgent, bore the familiar initials: "Return immediately. Most curious invitation requires consideration. Your presence essential. H.P." Experience had taught me that when Hercule Poirot deemed my presence essential, something intriguing, if not perilous, was afoot. Within the hour, I was striding through the fog toward Whitehaven Mansions, my mind turning over possibilities. A case, perhaps? Or some elaborate dinner engagement involving one of Poirot's more eccentric acquaintances. When I entered his sitting room, I found my old friend precisely as I expected, immaculate, poised, and radiating that quiet intensity that always signaled his mind was in motion. He sat before a small table, upon which lay a single sheet of heavy cream paper. Even from across the room, I could tell it was no ordinary correspondence. "Ah, mon ami, Hastings," he said without glancing up. "You are prompt. That is good. Regard this most curious communication, if you please." The invitation lay perfectly centered before him, flanked by his letter opener and magnifying glass, each aligned at an exact right angle, as though a draftsman had arranged them. I took the seat opposite and leaned forward to examine it. It was exquisitely crafted, the sort of stationery reserved for dukes and bankers. Fine cream stock, embossed with a crest, the ink a deep blue-black that shimmered faintly under the lamplight. At the top, written in elegant copperplate, were the words, "Sir Reginald Ashworth requests the honour of the company of Monsieur Hercule Poirot at an intimate dinner to be held in the private dining room of Claridge's Hotel, November 15th, at 8 precisely. This gathering shall serve as my last supper, and your presence would complete the circle most satisfactorily." I blinked at the page. "Good heavens," I murmured. "A last supper? That's not exactly a cheerful invitation, is it?" Poirot's moustache gave a slight twitch, the telltale sign of amusement or unease. With him, it was often both. "Précisément, Hastings. You perceive my own disquiet. Sir Reginald Ashworth, financier, political advisor, a man of impeccable standing, does not pen such melodrama without purpose. And yet, here it is." I turned the card over, searching for some clue in the paper or watermark. "Do you suppose he's ill? Perhaps it's a dramatic way of saying farewell before the end." Poirot regarded me with a raised brow. "Or perhaps, mon ami, he anticipates an ending not of nature's making. The phrase, 'complete the circle,' What does that suggest to you? I considered. That others will be present, a small group, close associates perhaps. Exactament. He speaks not of pleasure, but of honor. A subtle distinction, yes, but one that transforms this from mere social invitation to something ceremonial, even final. Poirot rose from his chair and began pacing the carpet, his hands clasped neatly behind his back. And note, too, the choice of venue. Claridge's, the very emblem of wealth and reputation. One does not stage a Last Supper there without an audience worth impressing. The fire crackled softly as he continued, his tone now darker. There is, of course, the biblical allusion. 12 guests, 1 table, and among them, betrayal. Ah, mon Dieu, how history repeats itself in such little dramas of men. I could not suppress a shiver. You think this dinner could end in tragedy? Poirot paused, turning sharply to face me. I think, Hastings, that a man as deliberate as Sir Reginald chooses every word for effect. If he declares this his final supper, we must ask, final for whom? Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, muffling the sound of passing carriages. Big Ben tolled the hour, its somber chime echoing through the city like a warning. I glanced once more at the ornate invitation lying under the lamp's glow and felt, quite inexplicably, that we had already crossed the threshold into something grave and inescapable. Poirot, meanwhile, resumed his seat and folded his hands. We shall attend, mon ami, but before that evening comes, we must learn everything about Sir Reginald Ashworth, the man, his friends, and above all, his enemies. For I have the strongest impression, he said quietly, that this dinner at Claridge's will not conclude with dessert. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. The private dining suite at Claridge's had been dressed with such grandeur that it seemed less a room and more a stage awaiting its performance. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, scattering prisms of light across a table of polished mahogany and immaculate silverware. The November fog pressed thickly against the tall windows outside, but within the atmosphere was all warmth, perfume, and faint tension. The table, arranged for 6, was a study in mathematical elegance, cutlery aligned with military precision, glasses placed in perfect symmetry. Hercule Poirot would have approved of the geometry. We arrived promptly at 8. My friend, ever the perfectionist, had spent an inordinate amount of time ensuring his attire was beyond reproach. His black evening coat bore no wrinkle, his shoes shone like mirrors, and his moustache, his pride, was waxed into sharp, immaculate points. I had come to recognize that such fastidiousness often heralded important events. When Poirot was meticulous, fate tended to follow suit. Observe, mon ami, he murmured as we were guided to our seats by a silent waiter. 6 places, each chosen with purpose. Our host has arranged this evening not as a dinner, but as a performance. Every gesture rehearsed, every participant cast in their role. The first to enter was Lady Evelyn Ashworth. She carried herself with the poise of someone who had long mastered the art of social control. Her gown, a deep sapphire silk, shimmered as she moved beneath the chandeliers. She was perhaps in her mid-40s, still strikingly handsome, her dark hair swept elegantly away from her face. Monsieur Poirot, she greeted with graceful warmth, extending a gloved hand. How wonderful to meet you at last. My husband has spoken of you often. Her voice had the smooth refinement of old English gentility, yet beneath the polish was an unmistakable undercurrent. Tension, perhaps sorrow, that her smile barely veiled. The pleasure, madame, is mine, said Poirot, bowing gallantly. His tone was courteous but observant. Even in politeness, he was gathering information. Their son, Henry Ashworth, entered next, tall, broad-shouldered, and visibly restless. Though he shared his mother's dark eyes and complexion, his energy was entirely different. He moved too quickly, his glances darting about the room as though measuring exits and angles. When he shook hands, his palm was damp despite the room's comfort. "Mr. Poirot, isn't it? Father's told me all about your cases. Quite thrilling stuff," he said, trying too hard to sound casual. Before Poirot could reply, another figure appeared, Julian Caro, a man whose very presence altered the air. He was about Sir Reginald's age, tall and silver-haired, with eyes as sharp as a surgeon's blade. There was history in his gaze, something unspoken that neither Lady Evelyn nor Sir Reginald seemed eager to acknowledge. "Caro," said Lady Evelyn, her tone perfectly neutral. "Evelyn," he replied, the word clipped, yet heavy with meaning. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Then came Miss Violet Grey, Sir Reginald's secretary, a woman of brisk intelligence and understated elegance. She was perhaps 30, with keen brown eyes that missed little and the measured composure of someone accustomed to serving powerful men. Though she smiled politely, she stood slightly apart, aware of the delicate social balance between family and employee. "Miss Grey has been indispensable to Reginald," Lady Evelyn remarked pleasantly. "I'm not sure how he manages without her." "Sir Reginald is very particular about his correspondence," Miss Grey replied lightly. "Every letter must be perfect." Before I could ponder whether her words held another layer of meaning, the door opened again, and Sir Reginald Ashworth himself entered. He cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, his silver hair gleaming like a crown. His very step carried authority. But tonight, there was something different about him, an almost fevered energy, as though he were propelled by some private burning purpose. "My dear friends," he announced, arms spread wide in a grand gesture, "how splendid to see you all here for this most significant evening." His voice was rich, but beneath its resonance I detected strain, a kind of desperate excitement that unsettled the room. He moved from guest to guest, all charm and formality, yet each greeting seemed to tighten the tension rather than relieve it. Lady Evelyn's smile grew brittle. Henry's nervousness deepened. Julian Caro's expression hardened into open distaste. Only Miss Grey kept her poise, though I noticed her grip on her clutch bag had whitened her knuckles. Finally, Sir Reginald turned to us. "Monsieur Poirot," he declared, his tone almost theatrical, "our guest of honor, how delighted I am that you could join us for my farewell dinner." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Farewell, monsieur? You speak as one taking leave, perhaps on a journey?" Sir Reginald laughed, though the sound was hollow. "Ah, but are we not all on journeys, my dear fellow? Some merely arrive at their destinations sooner than others." The words lingered in the air like smoke, heavy, cryptic, and oddly prophetic. I saw Poirot's eyes narrow, his mind already working beneath the calm surface. "Come," said Sir Reginald, moving to the head of the table. "Let us begin. The evening promises to be illuminating." As we took our seats, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just stepped into the first act of a tragedy. The room gleamed with silver and candlelight, but beneath the glitter ran an invisible current, one of secrets, old grievances, and unfinished reckonings. The stage was set, the players assembled, and somewhere, hidden within the folds of luxury and laughter, fate waited to make its entrance. Chapter 3. Courses of Betrayal. The first course arrived with the kind of flawless precision that only Claridge's could deliver. Waiters drifted between the guests like shadows, silent and assured, their silver trays glinting under the chandelier light. Yet my attention wasn't on the consommé placed before me, but on the strange intent behind the menu our host had chosen for this so-called farewell dinner. The clear broth shimmered like amber glass, its surface dotted with bitter herbs, tansy and wormwood. A curious choice, I thought, for what was meant to be a celebration. Sir Reginald Ashworth raised his spoon with a theatrical flourish. "Ah," he said, his tone carrying that polished edge of irony he wielded so well. "How fitting that we begin with something so transparent. Clarity, my friends, the rarest of luxuries in our modern age." Across the table, Lady Evelyn's hand trembled ever so slightly as she lifted her spoon. "Clarity," she murmured, her smile brittle. "Perhaps, but not every truth needs to be examined in daylight, Reginald. Some things are best left ambiguous." Her husband's smile sharpened like a blade. "Ah, but it is the ambiguous things, my dear, that prove most enlightening under scrutiny. Much like certain investments, the ones that fluctuate without reason until one learns where to look." His gaze shifted toward Julian Carew, whose jaw tightened visibly. The older man's expression remained outwardly polite, but the tension in his knuckles betrayed a storm beneath the calm. Meanwhile, young Henry Ashworth stared down at his soup as though it contained a prophecy. The spoon in his hand barely moved. When the first course was cleared, the second arrived. Fillets of sole in a delicate but heavily layered sauce. It smelled exquisite, yet the dish seemed to symbolize the very opposite of transparency. "Sole Veronique," Sir Reginald announced, as if delivering a lecture. "An excellent example of how something pure can be transformed or disguised through clever preparation. Rather like financial statements, wouldn't you say, Henry?" Henry's complexion drained to a sickly shade. "I'm afraid I don't quite understand, Father." "Oh, don't you?" Sir Reginald's tone was almost indulgent. "Surely you see the resemblance. A few figures adjusted here, a signature altered there, and suddenly, a rather ordinary transaction becomes something altogether different." Miss Violet Grey, ever composed, had quietly drawn a small notebook from her evening bag. Her pen glided over the page with calm efficiency, though I could not tell whether she was recording minutes or something far more personal. Occasionally, her eyes flicked toward Henry, and in them, I thought, lingered genuine concern. "Really, Reginald," Lady Evelyn interrupted, her voice tight but civil. "Must we speak of business at dinner? Surely there are more pleasant subjects." He turned to her with a cold smile. "Ah, pleasure. How fitting you should mention it, my dear. Tell me, do you still find your theatrical diversions as captivating as before? Though I imagine your tastes have matured." His tone made the implication unmistakable. The blood drained from Lady Evelyn's face. Her hand faltered mid-air. Beside me, Poirot's expression sharpened. His eyes moved like quicksilver from one guest to another, reading their reactions with quiet precision. Julian Carew could bear it no longer. "Ashworth," he said, voice low and dangerous, "if you have something to say it outright. This performance of yours borders on cruelty." "Cruelty?" Sir Reginald echoed, his brows rising. "My dear Julian, I speak only of truth, the most valuable commodity of all. Truth about business built on deception. Truth about marriages founded on convenience. Truth about loyalties bought and sold with alarming ease." A tense silence followed, broken only by the arrival of the third course, lamb in a dark, fragrant wine sauce. Its richness filled the air, but few of us tasted it. The conversation had grown so charged that every bite felt like swallowing glass. Miss Grey was the one to speak next, her voice measured but cool. "You speak of truth as if it were always welcome," she said. "But surely, Sir Reginald, some truths are better left unspoken." For the first time, His expression softened, not kindly, but approvingly. "Ah, perceptive as ever, my dear Violet. Indeed, the timing of truth is everything. Too soon, and it loses its power. Too late, and it serves no purpose. The art lies in choosing the perfect moment, when all pieces are in place, when every actor stands upon the stage." I felt Poirot grow utterly still beside me. His fork hovered midway to his mouth, forgotten. The faintest furrow appeared between his brows, that telltale sign that the little grey cells were already hard at work. There was something final, almost chilling in our host's tone, as though he were rehearsing a confession in plain sight. The waiters moved silently about the room, ghosts in black and white, clearing plates and refilling glasses. Yet the guests had lost their appetite. Each bite slowed, each sip lingered. Outside, the fog pressed heavier against the windows, muffling the city's hum. Inside, beneath the chandeliers and candlelight, unspoken accusations thickened the air. It felt less like a dinner and more like a trial. The evidence was emotional, the weapons invisible, and the verdict, I sensed, would not be long delayed. Chapter 4. The Final Toast. The hour had grown late, and the atmosphere within Claridge's private dining room had shifted from one of formality to something altogether more fragile. The servants, dismissed with a casual wave from Sir Reginald Ashcroft, had left behind an eerie stillness, one that seemed to magnify every unspoken resentment hanging in the air. The flickering chandelier light shimmered across the polished crystal and silver, glinting like sharp edges of truth, waiting to cut through the evening's polite facade. Miss Violet Grey had closed her notebook, her pen resting idle beside her glass. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between curiosity and concern, as she studied their host. Sir Reginald, ever the master of ceremony, took it upon himself to serve the final course, a delicate arrangement of exotic fruits and a single bottle of golden wine. Even before the label was visible, one could sense its rarity. "Chateau d'Em, 1921, he announced with the reverence of a priest conducting a ritual. "A wine that has waited 14 long years, patient, enduring, like justice itself. But every vintage, like every sin, must one day be brought forth." He poured with meticulous care, ensuring each glass brimmed to the same level, his movements as precise as a chemist handling a volatile formula. There was purpose in his poise, a dreadful ceremony unfolding beneath the surface of civility. Julian Carrel, the family's longtime associate, broke the silence with a thin smile. "Justice is a matter of perspective," he said, his tone edged with quiet defiance. "To some it looks remarkably like vengeance." Sir Reginald's eyes glittered. "Ah, Julian, philosophy suits you," he replied evenly. "Though perhaps recent events have made you more reflective. Tell me, do you still rest easily, knowing what transpired with those Bombay contracts?" The question struck like a dart. Carrel's composure faltered, his hand tightening around his napkin. Before he could respond, Lady Evelyn interjected, her voice trembling. "Reginald, please," she implored, her carefully composed calm unraveling. "Whatever your grievances, must we air them here? Must every wound be reopened tonight?" Her husband smiled faintly, but the softness in his voice only made his words colder. "My dear, when else should one discuss endings, if not at the end itself? Tonight is not about old wounds. It is about closure." At the far end of the table, young Henry Ashcroft, his son, sat pale and visibly shaken. "Father," he began, his voice cracking, "if this is about the Johannesburg accounts, I can explain. The discrepancies were clerical errors, nothing more." Reginald turned toward him, a ghost of amusement crossing his face. "Clerical errors," he repeated slowly. How charmingly naive. £30,000 is a rather extravagant mistake, don't you think? The room seemed to constrict with tension. Even the low hiss of the gaslights became audible in the silence that followed. Miss Grey's knuckles whitened around her lap, while Hercule Poirot, seated beside me, watched the scene unfold with that familiar, unnerving stillness of his. His keen eyes missed nothing. Sir Reginald rose then, lifting his glass high. The golden wine shimmered like liquid fire. "My friends," he began, "tonight we have shared more than food and conversation. We have shared truth. And truth, unpleasant though it may be, demands acknowledgement." His gaze swept across them. His wife, his son, his partner, and his secretary, each flinching under its weight. "Evelyn, my devoted wife, who found solace in younger arms while I built our fortune. Henry, my heir, whose loyalty proved negotiable. Julian, my partner in both business and betrayal. And Miss Grey, who has kept her secrets far more carefully than I ever suspected." Evelyn had begun to cry silently, the paint of sophistication melting into streaks of despair. Henry sat frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. Julian's expression hardened into contempt, while Violet Grey's voice trembled as she spoke. "You speak of truth, Sir Reginald, but what of mercy? Must every debt be repaid in pain?" A slow smile curved across his lips, and the reflection of the chandelier danced in his eyes like fire. "Mercy, Miss Grey, is a luxury for the innocent," he said quietly. "For the rest of us there is only justice, long delayed, but never denied." With that, he raised his glass. "To endings," he declared, his voice deep and resonant, "and to the consequences we cannot escape." But before the toast could be completed, his hand jerked violently. A strangled gasp escaped his throat as his body convulsed. The crystal goblet slipped from his fingers, striking the floor in an explosion of amber and shards. The scent of the rare wine filled the air as Sir Reginald collapsed beside the table, his body crumpling with terrible finality. For a moment, no one moved. Then the room erupted into chaos. Lady Evelyn's scream, the crash of a chair, Poirot's sharp command for calm, all merging into a scene of panic and disbelief. The master of the house had fallen, not by the hand of another's wrath, but seemingly by his own orchestrated fate. Chapter 5. The Locked Room. Lady Evelyn's scream tore through the still air, shattering the fragile calm that lingered after Sir Reginald's collapse. The sound was raw and primal, echoing through the panelled walls of Claridge's grand dining suite like a note of pure despair. Henry Ashcroft, pale and trembling, lurched to his feet so violently that his chair crashed backward against the marble floor. He stumbled toward his father's fallen form, his voice breaking. "Father! Please! Father!" He dropped to his knees, hands fluttering uselessly over the lifeless figure as though searching for a pulse that stubbornly refused to answer. It was Poirot who restored order to the chaos. Rising with calm precision, he moved toward the body with deliberate grace. "Monsieur Henry," he said quietly but firmly, "touch nothing, I beg of you. We must preserve the scene exactly as it is." The command was gentle, but carried such authority that Henry froze instantly, his breath hitching in his throat. Miss Violet Grey, her composure remarkable given the horror of the moment, knelt beside Sir Reginald, carefully avoiding the glittering shards of the shattered wine glass. She placed 2 fingers against his wrist, her expression solemn. "There's no pulse," she whispered. "He's gone." Julian Carell took an unsteady step backward, his complexion ashen. "Dead," he murmured under his breath. "Good Lord, the man's actually dead." Poirot's keen gaze swept the room, missing nothing. The angle of the fallen chair, the pool of golden wine spreading across the carpet, the still burning chandelier overhead. "We must call for assistance," he said. "But until the authorities arrive, no one leaves this room. Not a single item must be disturbed." Lady Evelyn, sobbing quietly into her handkerchief, looked up in protest. "But there may still be a chance. Surely we must summon a doctor." "There is one dining downstairs," Poirot replied gently. "Dr. Patterson. Miss Grey, please ring for the manager and request the doctor at once. Tell him only that there has been an accident." As Miss Grey crossed the room, the bell pull cord trembling slightly in her hand, a chilling awareness seemed to settle over everyone present. A few moments ago, they had been unwilling guests at a dinner filled with uncomfortable revelations. Now they were witnesses, perhaps even suspects, in a sudden death cloaked in mystery. Poirot crouched beside the body, his movements careful, his mind working with that familiar, methodical brilliance. He noted the position of Sir Reginald's hands, the way the wine had splashed outward from the broken glass, the faint residue of condensation upon the table where the bottle had stood. "Curious," he murmured, half to himself. "The glass fell from his right hand, and yet the stain pattern does not entirely agree." He stopped himself, frowning slightly. No, one must not draw conclusions too hastily." Moments later, the door opened to admit the hotel manager, a dignified man struggling to conceal his alarm, and behind him, Dr. Patterson, a stout gentleman with greying hair and a physician's practiced calm. He went straight to the fallen man, kneeling beside him with clinical detachment. His examination was brief but thorough. When he rose, his face was grave. "There's nothing to be done," he said quietly. "He's been dead for several minutes." "Can you determine the cause?" Poirot asked. Dr. Patterson hesitated, studying the pale features of the deceased. "Difficult to say without a proper autopsy. Perhaps a sudden cardiac failure, triggered by emotional strain. There are no marks of violence, no visible injury." Henry's voice trembled. "What about poison?" The doctor looked up sharply. "Poison? Well, it's not impossible," he admitted, "though there are no immediate signs. No discoloration, no odor, no frothing. If poison was involved, it must have been something exceedingly refined." The sound of hurried footsteps announced the arrival of Inspector Japp, his weathered face marked by equal parts curiosity and exasperation. "Poirot," he said dryly, removing his hat. "If there's a mysterious death in London, I might as well assume you'll be sitting beside it." Poirot offered a faint smile. "You flatter me, mon ami." Japp surveyed the scene, nodding toward the body. "So, let me get this straight. The old man makes a series of accusations against everyone in the room, lifts his glass for a toast, and drops dead before taking a sip. Servants gone, doors closed, only the accused present. Convenient, wouldn't you say?" Poirot inclined his head. "Convenient, yes, but perhaps not for the one you imagine." Japp grunted, turning to his constable. "Right, statements from everyone, and have that wine bottle and what's left of the glass contents sent to the lab for analysis." As the inspector began taking notes, Poirot stood slightly apart, his gaze distant but sharp. He wasn't watching the people anymore, he was watching the room itself. The positioning of the decanter, the uneven spread of wine on the carpet, the curious absence of fingerprints on certain surfaces. These were the details others dismissed, but to Poirot, they spoke volumes. Something was wrong, not glaringly, but subtly so. And as the police began sealing off the dining room, the truth settled over me with an uneasy weight. Sir Reginald Ashcroft had not merely died during his final toast. His death had been staged, orchestrated within a room that no one had entered or left. Chapter 6. Secrets in Silver. The following morning found Poirot and me in his sitting room, the early London fog pressing faintly against the windows like a shroud. Spread neatly across his mahogany desk were the notes from our interviews, arranged with the same meticulous precision that characterized every one of his investigations. The preliminary police report lay open before us, its findings as unsatisfactory as they were perplexing. Dr. Patterson's examination had uncovered no visible cause of death, no wounds, no bruising, not even the faintest trace of poison in the remnants of the wine. It was, by all appearances, an impossible death. "Most curious, mon ami," Poirot murmured, adjusting his tie and frowning thoughtfully. "A man dies amid accusations, surrounded by those who might wish him harm, yet science, science, which prides itself on its certainty, can find no answer. C'est très étrange." I ventured the simplest explanation. "Perhaps it was his heart, Poirot. The tension of the evening, those revelations, that dramatic display. Surely such strain could overwhelm a man of his years." Poirot turned toward me with that particular look I had come to dread, half pity, half amusement. No, Hastings. You see, Sir Reginald Ashcroft was not a man ruled by emotion. He staged that dinner as one might direct a play, each word rehearsed, each gesture measured. Such a man does not fall victim to his own performance. Non, there is something more deliberate at work here. Our first visit of the day took us to Lady Evelyn Ashcroft's residence in Belgravia, a home of stately elegance, now dimmed by grief. The townhouse was exquisite, yet curiously incomplete. Faint outlines on the wallpaper revealed where paintings had once hung, and mantels bore the absence of once cherished ornaments. It was a household quietly unraveling. Lady Evelyn received us in her morning room, her black silk gown immaculate, though her pallor betrayed sleepless nights. "I've told Inspector Japp everything I can," she said softly, her voice brittle with fatigue. "Reginald and we were estranged. There was affection once, but it withered long ago." Poirot's voice was gentle, but his words cut cleanly. "Madame, your husband made reference to theatrical amusements. Might there have been someone particular?" Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her teacup. "His name was David Marlowe," she confessed after a pause. "He's an actor, young, talented and kind. Reginald discovered our friendship and swore he'd destroy David's career unless I ended it. He kept me under constant surveillance, my letters, my calls. Miss Grey monitored everything. I was a prisoner, Mr. Poirot, a well-dressed prisoner." As we left, Poirot made quiet notes about the missing valuables and her strained finances. It seemed Lady Evelyn's grief was genuine, but tinged with desperation. Our next stop was Henry Ashcroft's modest flat in Bloomsbury, where faded grandeur hung in the air like a ghost. His sitting room was filled with furniture that had once been fine, now worn with time and debt. When pressed, he admitted the truth with the nervous candor of a man cornered. "The Johannesburg investments were mine," Henry said, his voice low. "I thought I could recover the losses before father discovered them, but I made unwise choices." "Unwise?" Poirot prompted gently. "Gambling debts," Henry muttered, looking away. "I borrowed from the accounts, thinking I could win it back. But luck is a treacherous mistress, Monsieur Poirot." "Ah," Poirot sighed. £30,000 is a costly tutor in the mathematics of folly." The afternoon led us into the heart of the city, to Julian Carell's grand offices near the Bank of England. The financier greeted us with the chill civility of a man accustomed to control. "Ashcroft was a visionary," he said coldly, and like most visionaries, he mistook recklessness for brilliance. The Bombay cotton contracts were doomed from the start. I tried to warn him. Yet you remained his partner, Poirot observed mildly. I stayed to contain the damage, Carrel snapped. He would have ruined us both had I not intervened. When it all collapsed, he blamed me for his own arrogance. His bitterness was barely veiled. The wound, though professional, was deeply personal. Our final visit brought us to Miss Violet Grey's flat in Marylebone, a world apart from the others. Her rooms were simple, almost austere, yet every surface was alive with green. Shelves, tables and windowsills overflowed with botanical specimens, orchids, succulents, and rare plants whose names I could scarcely pronounce. Books on botany and pharmacology lined the walls, some marked with notes in precise handwriting. I study plants, Miss Grey explained when she caught me examining a particularly unusual specimen. Their properties fascinate me. A single leaf can heal or kill, depending on how it's used. She pointed to a delicate plant with white blossoms. This one produces an extract that can slow the heart. Just a few drops can mean the difference between life and death. Poirot's gaze lingered on the collection longer than was strictly polite. Most interesting, mademoiselle, he said softly. And do you keep records of your experiments? I'm meticulous, she replied, almost proudly. Every test, every result. As we made our way back through the evening streets, the city's fog curling around the lamplight, I struggled to make sense of the tangled motives that had begun to emerge. Each of the dinner guests had reason enough to wish Sir Reginald gone, yet none seemed capable of orchestrating such an impossible death. The plants trouble you, Hastings? Poirot asked, reading my thoughts as always. It seems a bit too coincidental, I admitted. A man dies suddenly, and one of the suspects just happens to be an expert in poisons. Poirot smiled faintly, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. Ah, mon ami, you are thinking in straight lines again. Remember, what appears too obvious is often a screen, a clever misdirection. The truth, I fear, hides not in what we have seen, but in what we have not yet noticed. Chapter 7. The smallest detail. 3 days had passed since the death of Sir Reginald Ashworth, when Hercule Poirot, with his usual air of calm inevitability, announced that we would be returning to Claridge's for what he termed a final examination of the facts. The inspector had permitted it reluctantly, likely suspecting that the famous detective's definition of examination included a touch of drama. As we set out that grey London morning, Poirot explained his reasoning with a gleam in his eye. To see clearly, Hastings, one must place oneself precisely where the truth was first obscured. The little grey cells, eh bien, require the right surroundings to awaken their inspiration. The management of Claridge's, ever eager to oblige celebrity, had meticulously recreated the private dining room exactly as it had appeared on that fatal evening. Every glass and fork gleamed under the chandeliers, the polished mahogany table reflected the candlelight, and even the empty wine bottle, its contents long since tested, stood in its original position like a ghostly witness. All the principal guests of that ill-fated supper were present once more, though their reasons for attending varied greatly. Lady Evelyn entered with a quiet dignity that barely concealed her exhaustion. Henry Ashworth looked pale and twitchy, twisting his gloves nervously as he took his seat. Julian Carew radiated resentment, his sharp eyes watching Poirot's every move, while Miss Violet Grey, composed as ever, displayed only the faintest sign of strain behind her professional poise. Poirot stepped to the head of the table, the same place where Sir Reginald had stood for his final toast, and began in his deliberate silken tone. Mesdames et messieurs, we are not here to mourn the dead, but to comprehend. Somewhere amid these glittering glasses and polished spoons lies a truth so small, so delicate, that all of us have failed to see it. He moved slowly around the table, examining the setting with the care of a man studying sacred relics. No movement was wasted. His eyes traveled from the decanters to the folded napkins, from the polished silver to the lingering scent of wax and linen. "The wine has been examined," he said thoughtfully. "No trace of poison, the glasses spotless, the food innocent. And yet a man died in this very room. What does that tell us?" Caro leaned forward, exasperated. "Are you suggesting he simply dropped dead for dramatic effect, Poirot? That his own theatrics killed him?" Poirot did not reply immediately. Instead, his gaze settled on a small patch of white linen before Sir Reginald's former seat. His hand reached out, hovering over an unremarkable silver spoon lying beside the dessert dish. Then he turned, his eyes resting on Miss Grey. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "you mentioned that Sir Reginald took medication during the dinner. Would you be so kind as to describe that moment?" Miss Grey hesitated, the faintest tremor in her calm voice. "He complained of indigestion during the main course. I had brought his usual digestive powder and measured a small dose with my personal spoon. It's one I carry for such situations." "How very thoughtful," Poirot murmured. "And you still have this spoon?" "Yes, I believe so." She opened her handbag and produced a tiny, beautifully wrought silver spoon, delicate, almost ornamental. Poirot accepted it reverently, turning it over in the light. For a long moment he said nothing, only examining the subtle shimmer along its surface. Then his mustache twitched ever so slightly, a sign, as I knew too well, that a crucial realization had struck him. "How extraordinary," he murmured. "Such a small object, yet it holds the entire truth within its gleam." His tone sharpened slightly as he addressed Miss Grey once more. "You have not cleaned it since that evening, I presume?" She shook her head. "No, there was no reason to. It was used only for the powder." "Precisely." Poirot's voice now carried a quiet triumph. "And therein lies the tragedy. This innocent little spoon was no mere utensil. It was the weapon." The words fell like thunder in that silent room. Lady Evelyn turned ashen, Henry's mouth dropped open in disbelief, and even Caro's scowl gave way to stunned curiosity. Miss Grey, however, seemed to crumple inward, her hands trembling violently. Poirot's voice softened, almost pitying. "You see, mademoiselle, the poison was not in the wine or the food. It was hidden in plain sight, applied to this spoon, mixed with the powder Sir Reginald trusted you to administer. A toxin derived, I think, from one of your cherished botanical specimens, slow-acting, precise, designed to strike only after sufficient time had passed for him to complete his grand accusations." Her face drained of color. I never meant," she whispered, but Poirot raised a hand gently. "You meant for him to suffer as he made others suffer," he said quietly. "You disguised justice as mercy and revenge as compassion. A dangerous confusion, mademoiselle." The weight of his revelation filled the room like a storm about to break. What had once seemed an impossible mystery, an unsolvable puzzle of locked doors and empty glasses, now resolved itself into a chillingly simple truth. The instrument of death had been before us all along, too small, too ordinary for any of us to question. And as Poirot placed the silver spoon carefully upon the tablecloth, its polished surface gleaming like a symbol of human folly, I realized once again the truth of his favorite maxim. It is the smallest detail, Hastings, that reveals the greatest crime. Chapter 8. Justice Served. The silence that followed Poirot's revelation was so taut it seemed to hum in the air. No one moved. The elegant dining room at Claridge's, so full of laughter and light just nights before, had become an icy theater of truth. Violet Grey sat frozen in her chair, her face drained of color, her eyes fixed on the tiny silver spoon that glittered accusingly under the chandelier. Around her, the remaining guests watched in stunned disbelief. Lady Evelyn pale as porcelain, Henry Ashworth trembling, and Julian Carew staring with grim fascination. Near the doorway stood Inspector Graves, who had slipped in quietly during Poirot's explanation, his practiced calm betraying the instincts of a man who knew that the next words spoken would decide a life. Poirot turned toward the assembled company with that measured gentleness that always marked his final act, the moment when the veil between deception and truth was fully torn away. "Mademoiselle Grey," he began softly, "your knowledge of plants is remarkable, especially your study of Digitalis obscura, a rare and beautiful variant of the foxglove. A flower capable of sustaining life or ending it." For a heartbeat, Miss Grey did not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper. "You can't prove that." "Ah, but I can," Poirot replied almost sorrowfully. "The residue upon that spoon will confirm it beyond doubt. And your own journals, those careful notes detailing dosages and timing, will reveal your understanding of how long the poison would take to act. You prepared your plan with the precision of a chemist and the patience of a saint." Dr. Patterson, who had been listening intently, adjusted his spectacles and nodded gravely. "A digitalis compound could indeed cause cardiac failure," he said. "Depending on the concentration, symptoms might not appear for 30 or 40 minutes. It fits the timeline perfectly." Lady Evelyn found her voice at last, her confusion breaking through the shock. "But why?" she cried. "Miss Grey, you were so loyal to him. What possible reason could you have?" Violet Grey lifted her gaze then, and the mask she had worn for years, of composure, of obedience, of quiet servitude, crumbled away. Her voice trembled not from fear, but from long-buried fury. "Loyal?" she repeated bitterly. "For 7 years, I organized his correspondence, balanced his books, and kept his secrets. I knew exactly what kind of man Sir Reginald Ashworth truly was. He ruined lives while smiling for society's approval, and he ruined my brother most of all." The air seemed to still around her as she went on. "Richard Grey was an honest broker. He trusted Sir Reginald, questioned one of his riskier ventures, and for that, he was destroyed. Reginald forged documents, fabricated accounts, and accused Richard of embezzlement. He watched him fall with satisfaction." Her tone softened only slightly, trembling with memory. "My brother took his own life rather than face trial for a crime he never committed." Even Carew, hardened by business and cynicism, looked shaken. The inspector's pen halted mid-note. Poirot regarded her gravely. "So you took a position in Sir Reginald's household," he said. "A secretary, silent, trusted, invisible. The perfect position from which to seek your justice." "I wanted him to suffer," Violet said quietly, her voice steady now. "To know the terror of exposure, the humiliation of helplessness. He thought he could manipulate everyone, even in death. His final dinner was meant to destroy reputations, yours, Lady Evelyn's, his own son's. I simply ensured that his performance would not have an encore." Inspector Graves stepped forward, his expression professional but not unkind. "Miss Violet Grey," he said formally, "I am placing you under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Ashworth. You are not obliged to say anything, but anything you do say may be used in evidence." She rose with quiet composure, smoothing the front of her dark dress. As the constable approached, she paused beside Poirot, her eyes meeting his. "You understand, Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "what it means to wait for justice that never comes. Sometimes one must act, before time erases the truth. Poirot's voice was calm, but touched with sadness. I understand the hunger for justice, mademoiselle. But when we take the law into our own hands, we risk losing the very thing we seek to honor. Your brother would not have wished this for you. She nodded once, neither defiant nor repentant, and allowed herself to be led from the room. The others sat in stunned quiet, the air heavy with the mingled scent of perfume and moral reckoning. The grand table, with its gleaming crystal and abandoned glasses, now seemed merely a stage stripped of illusion. "Well," said Inspector Graves briskly after a moment, snapping his notebook shut. "That concludes it. Fine piece of work, Monsieur Poirot. Spotting that business with the spoon. Might have taken us weeks otherwise." Poirot adjusted his tie, his expression unreadable. "It was nothing, my friend," he murmured. "Merely the recognition that the smallest things often hold the greatest significance." As we stepped out into the London fog, the city lights shimmered faintly through the mist like distant stars. Poirot walked in silence for some time before speaking. "A tragic case, Hastings. Yet it reminds us that even when justice delays, it never truly disappears. It waits, patient as the truth itself." The fog curled around us as we reached our lodgings, carrying with it the lingering echo of secrets confessed and debts repaid. Within that elegant dining room at Claridge's, the curtain had fallen on one final act of vengeance disguised as virtue. It was, as Poirot said later that night, a supper of endings, mon ami, where the last course was justice itself. Here's a complete chapter-by-chapter analysis of The Last Supper at Claridge's. Chapter 1. An Invitation Most Curious. The story begins in a fog-shrouded London evening, where Hastings receives a telegram from Poirot, summoning him urgently to Whitehaven Mansions. On arrival, Hastings discovers Poirot studying a lavish invitation from the esteemed financier Sir Reginald Ashworth, an invitation to a last supper at Claridge's hotel. The phrasing is ominous, the tone theatrical. Poirot immediately suspects a deeper meaning. A man of Sir Reginald's reputation does not speak of finality without intention. Beneath the civility of the setting, the mystery begins to simmer. Poirot senses that this dinner will not simply end with coffee and conversation, but with revelation. What we learn. Poirot's brilliance lies in his attention to language and tone, not just evidence. He teaches us that meaning hides between the lines. Moral theme. Words can foreshadow fate. Even politeness can carry prophecy. Viewer question. If you were invited to a final supper, would you accept or trust your instincts and decline? Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. At Claridge's, the stage is set for an evening of elegance and unease. The dining room gleams under crystal chandeliers, every place setting arranged with almost sacred precision. Poirot notes that such symmetry is no accident. It reflects the host's obsessive control. The guests assemble: Lady Evelyn Ashworth, her beauty shadowed by sorrow; Henry, their anxious son; Julian Carew, the cold-eyed business partner; and Miss Violet Grey, the efficient yet enigmatic secretary. Sir Reginald enters with grand authority but a restless edge, speaking of closure, fate, and unfinished business. His words chill the air. "If this is to be my final supper, let it be memorable." The tension is palpable, each guest a potential confessor or conspirator. What we learn. Appearances at the table of the elite often mask inner turmoil. The dinner, though sumptuous, feels like a trial disguised as a toast. Moral theme. Power invites pretense, and civility is often the last refuge of guilt. Viewer question. Have you ever sensed that a celebration was hiding something unsaid? Chapter 3. Courses of Betrayal. As each course is served, conversation becomes a weapon. The menu itself, bitter herbs, concealed flavors, mirrors the tone of the evening. Sir Reginald uses his words like blades, exposing scandals under the guise of polite discussion. He mocks his son's financial failures, taunts his wife's rumored affair, and hints at Julian Caro's dishonesty in business. Miss Grey watches silently, recording each remark in her notebook with unnerving precision. Poirot remains observant, his mind registering every slip of expression, every flicker of guilt. What begins as dinner transforms into psychological warfare, with truth served in slow, deliberate portions. What we learn: the human appetite for dominance often manifests in cruelty, disguised as wit. Each insult reveals not strength, but fear. Moral theme: the hunger for control can consume both the victor and the victim. Viewer. Question: would you rather expose a painful truth or live comfortably beneath a lie? Chapter 4. The Final Toast. When the final course is served, the atmosphere is electric with dread. Sir Reginald pours a rare golden wine, comparing it to justice long delayed. Each guest is forced to confront their own shame as he names their sins: infidelity, betrayal, theft. Poirot, sensing the climax, remains silent but watchful. Then, in a moment both theatrical and chilling, Sir Reginald raises his glass to endings and consequences. Before the toast can be completed, he convulses violently and collapses. The golden wine spills across the marble floor, its scent mingling with shock and disbelief. The host's farewell has become his execution. What we learn: the desire to orchestrate one's own reckoning often blinds one to danger. Fate is rarely a servant, it's a mirror. Moral theme: those who play God with truth often meet divine irony. Viewer. Question: if you knew your words could destroy a life, would you still speak them? Chapter 5. The Locked Room. Chaos erupts, and the grand dining suite becomes a sealed chamber of suspicion. Poirot quickly restores order, his eyes already scanning the room like a surgeon studying a wound. No sign of poison is found in the wine, and there are no marks of struggle. Inspector Japp arrives, skeptical but intrigued, declaring it another of Poirot's performances. Yet, as evidence mounts, no one entering or leaving, no visible cause, the case transforms into an impossible puzzle. Poirot's calm deepens. He senses that the killer's weapon is not force, but precision. The locked room, he muses, hides not the murderer, but the method. What we learn: true mystery lies not in locked doors, but in overlooked details. The smallest element can contain the entire truth. Moral theme: precision, not power, defines both genius and guilt. Viewer. Question: do you believe every perfect crime hides in plain sight or in plain habit? Chapter 6. Secrets in Silver. Poirot and Hastings visit each suspect, peeling back layers of deceit. Lady Evelyn's affair reveals emotional imprisonment, not malice. Henry's financial crimes expose shame, not hatred. Caro's bitterness suggests envy more than guilt. But Violet Grey, the quiet secretary, draws Poirot's deepest attention. Her fascination with toxic plants, her meticulous notebooks, and her calm efficiency align too neatly with the mechanics of a murder that leaves no trace. Still, Poirot holds his theory in silence. As the city fog presses against the windows, he reminds Hastings that the truth is never far. It merely waits for one to look closely enough. What we learn: justice is patient but relentless. Lies dissolve when met with curiosity instead of assumption. Moral theme: Those who master silence often speak loudest when truth arrives. Viewer. Question: which is more dangerous, knowledge misused or emotion uncontrolled? Chapter 7. The smallest detail. Poirot gathers all the surviving guests back at Claridge's, reconstructing the night down to the last glass and napkin. As he retraces the final toast, his gaze lands upon an ordinary silver spoon, Miss Grey's personal utensil used to measure Sir Reginald's digestive powder. It is there, he reveals, that the truth resides. The poison, derived from her botanical studies, was applied directly to the spoon, not the wine. Subtle, elegant, fatal. Miss Grey's composure fractures. She confesses not in words, but in silence. Poirot's tone remains steady but mournful. He understands her intellect, even her motive, but not her choice. What we learn: evil rarely announces itself loudly. It often wears the face of intellect and reason. Moral theme: justice without mercy transforms wisdom into ruin. Viewer. Question: can revenge ever truly serve the cause of justice? Chapter 8. Justice Served. In the final act, Poirot exposes the full scope of Violet Grey's tragedy. Her brother's ruin at Sir Reginald's hands drove her to vengeance disguised as duty. Every ledger she balanced, every letter she typed, brought her closer to this moment of retribution. Yet, her victory is hollow. The justice she sought has already consumed her peace. As Inspector Graves leads her away, Poirot delivers his quiet verdict, not to the law, but to the human soul. Justice delayed is dangerous, but justice corrupted is fatal. The story closes under the London fog, the glow of Claridge's chandeliers fading into the night. What we learn: truth prevails, but it does not heal. Justice, though necessary, cannot undo grief. Moral theme: when vengeance masquerades as righteousness, both sinner and victim are lost. Viewer. Question: is moral justice ever worth the personal cost it demands? Key characters analysis. In The Last Supper at Claridge's, each character embodies a distinct element of pride, guilt, and moral reckoning that defines the story's intricate design. Hercule Poirot stands at the center as the unflinching voice of intellect and justice, unraveling deception with logic sharpened by compassion. Captain Hastings serves as both narrator and moral observer, guiding the audience through the fog of suspicion with human warmth and quiet integrity. Sir Reginald Ashworth, the wealthy financier and host, is the architect of his own downfall, a man whose arrogance and cruelty draw his destruction to the very table he commands. Lady Evelyn Ashworth, poised and tragic, represents love eroded by betrayal, her elegance concealing years of humiliation. Henry Ashworth, their son, carries the burden of inheritance and guilt, a reflection of how family legacy can corrupt even the well-intentioned. Julian Carow, the calculating business partner, moves through the story as ambition personified. His loyalty swayed by profit, not conscience. Violet Grey, the composed secretary, becomes the quiet storm beneath the surface, her intelligence and restraint masking a deadly resolve driven by vengeance. Inspector Japp embodies conventional authority, methodical yet limited, serving as a foil to Poirot's insight into human nature. The supporting guests and hotel staff form the backdrop of civility against which the facade of high society collapses. Together, these figures transform a refined dinner into a moral crucible where truth, guilt, and consequence converge beneath the glittering chandeliers of Claridge's. My final thoughts. At its heart, The Last Supper at Claridge's is not merely a tale of murder, but a meditation on pride, vengeance, and the fragile illusion of control. Within the grandeur of luxury and etiquette lies a moral battlefield where human ambition meets its reckoning. Poirot's calm intelligence exposes the rot beneath refinement, reminding us that deceit can exist even in the most polished of places. Every guest at the table becomes a reflection of human weakness, some driven by greed, others by guilt, and one by the cold pursuit of justice twisted into revenge. The story ends not with triumph, but with quiet melancholy, showing that truth, while victorious, often leaves ruin in its wake. Beneath the glittering chandeliers of Claridge's, the lesson is clear. No amount of wealth, wit, or secrecy can protect one from the truth. If you found this unraveling of mystery and morality compelling, subscribe for more analytical deep dives into classic detective tales and share your thoughts below, because the most intriguing mysteries are the ones we explore together.